And Veronica McNally, as we finish this show talking about building community immunity, we now welcome Dr. Pino Colone. He is an emergency medicine specialist with Henry Ford Health System. Dr. Colone, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And Veronica, I am going to continue letting you kind of kick these segments off because I know that this is something that is very important to you, emergency medicine, and you've got a lot of questions for Dr. Colone.
Yeah, Dr. Colone, it's been a rough couple of years. Can you talk about how the pandemic has impacted patient care in Michigan?
Well, that's a great question, and it's not an easy one. When I think about something like that, I think about where we were and where we are. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was so much unknown and so many things that we needed to do, so many things that were new and scary for all of us. Patients were dying alone in the hospitals and the emergency departments. Over this period of time, especially now, where we seem to be seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, we can reflect on what we've learned. But in that time, there has been a lot of fear, a lot of burnout on the part of our patients, on the part of our healthcare workers as well. So this has been quite a journey for us. We went for, at least in the emergency department, caring for those in the departments, fearing for our lives every day, going to work, coming home, changing in the garage for fear of bringing something in the house. And now the manifestations of all that have led to the moral injury, or the burnout as it's sometimes referred to. And so it's nice to have what seems to be this period of respite now, where we can collectively catch our breaths and get ready for what faces us ahead.
What role did vaccinations play in this pandemic in terms of emergency care?
Well, that cannot be underemphasized. Where we are today would not have been possible without vaccines. Even those that are getting ill now, if they've been vaccinated, those are mild illnesses. It continues to be true that those in the hospitals, those who are really sick, those who are passing away from the disease, are those who are unvaccinated in the overwhelming majority of cases.
And now we're starting to see that mask mandates have lifted, less people are wearing masks. Has there been any change in what you're seeing in terms of patient volume with that factor?
Well, the interesting thing that has been most evident, I'll compare last year to this year. Last year, when the mask mandates were everywhere, I didn't see one case of influenza, which was the first time in my 25-year career that has been the case. Now that mask mandates have been relaxed, we're starting to see much more influenza, in addition to other respiratory illnesses, and yes, even COVID, even though the numbers are down somewhat.
So you mentioned influenza. I think it's a good time to maybe talk about the importance of influenza vaccination. Over the years, obviously before COVID, since the masking has been effective as it relates to preventing influenza, what can you say about the significance of that disease?
That disease has not gone away. Although it hasn't been in the forefront the last 2 years, it is still there. It is still very, very important to get those vaccines, because it is, before the pandemic, it was true that the influenza killed 64,000 people every year in this country. So it is not an insignificant disease.
Yeah. And I know you have some questions for Dr. Colone too.
I do, Veronica. First of all, Dr. Colone, I want to talk a little bit more about the mask mandates and masking up. I'm really conflicted about it, because I kind of think when you're in a big crowd still, for example, on an airplane, on a train, or in an area where there's a lot of people and you're closely packed in with them, that a mask is still a pretty good idea. What do you think?
Well, a couple of ways to answer that question. First of all, I think that you should do what's individually most important for you. And I think you're smart to have that mindset. I'll take this back and I'll give you my own perspective. Before my 9-year-old was eligible for the vaccine, I was fully vaccinated. I wore my mask whenever he and I would go grocery shopping, for example. I wanted to set a good example. It didn't matter to me what others were doing. I care for myself and my family. And to your other point about feeling more comfortable wearing a mask, just look at the recent gathering in Washington, where there have been 70 cases that came out of that dinner. So are you cautious for doing so? Yes. Are you smart for doing so? Yes. You need to think about you, yourself, your family, your individual health concerns. So I don't think anybody should fault anyone else if they feel comfortable wearing a mask.
Now, you recently wrote an op-ed around how we can shift our thinking about COVID from it being a pandemic to more of a endemic. Can you address that and explain what your thinking is?
Well, to oversimplify things, the pandemic, as we experienced initially and continue to experience, that's world devastation. And I don't mean to say that in overly dramatic form, but that's the context in which I like to put this, because it helps give people more clarity when they're thinking about these things, rather than influenza, which is a more manageable disease, and it comes around and the vaccine takes care of that, and it is seasonal and we know what to expect when it happens. When this came out, nobody knew of the disease, nobody knew what to expect, even though SARS and MERS of many years past were corona type viruses. We had never seen a virus like this.
So, what are you thinking right now? Are we still in the pandemic? And then how close are we to getting toward an endemic?
Technically we're still in the pandemic, but boy, it feels a lot better than it did last year. I feel like I mentioned earlier, we're able to collectively catch our breaths and at least see some sunshine at the end of the tunnel, some light at the end of the tunnel. Does that mean there aren't going to be more variants? Absolutely not. There will be. BA2 is currently circulating. There will be others, but we have to be prepared, and we will learn just like we've learned all along the way throughout the entire pandemic.
Now, what kind of questions are you getting from people when they come in to see you with regard to vaccination, masking, just the virus in general?
Should I get vaccinated, and is it safe, and which booster should I get? So let's back up and talk about should I get vaccinated. In the emergency department, I have this unique time to interact and form a bond with somebody, and we see everybody across every spectrum, every community. And so I'm very, very aware of vaccine hesitancy and why it exists, and how to address it. And so I start off typically asking open-ended questions. What is it I can answer for you? And so I try to make headway there. The other thing is, oh my gosh, how could it be safe because it was developed so quickly? So we start talking about the difference being there were billions and billions of dollars and many, many more researchers put into this process. So the process was not new at all. It just got more attention, which is why we were able to get these vaccines to market much more quickly.
All really, really important and great advice. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Dr.
Nice.
Pino Colone, emergency medicine specialist with Henry Ford Health System. And Veronica, it was great being with you again, talking about building community immunity, especially as these cases are starting to, be a little bit lower. Some good news here today. You've been listening to Why I Vaccinate, presented by the FRANNY Strong Foundation and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. I'm Ann Thomas, and on behalf of my co-host, Veronica McNally, thank you for listening, and we hope you have a great day.